It's 2018, and a record number of women have been elected to Congress. 105 years ago, thousands of people marched right down Pennsylvania Avenue demanding women have the right to vote. And as Annie Taylor shows us, they had been fighting much longer than that.
Wyoming. It is known as having wide open spaces, cowboys, even cattle. But did you know this is the first state that gave women the right to vote?
Oh, it was big news.
Big news it was back in 1870, 50 years before it was enacted into the Constitution. The woman suffragettes pushing for men to grant them equal rights.
We owe this act to men because obviously men were the only people who could pass such a law in the territory at the time.
According to Kim Viner, a docent for the Laramie Plains Museum, the men passed the act to allow women the right to vote and hold office in hopes it would bring more families to Wyoming and help the territory become a state.
Well, the very first woman who benefited, shall we say, from the suffrage act was Esther Hobart Morris,
the first female justice of peace. Now, Wyoming had many firsts for women. Also on the wall, the first female bailiff and governor. But it was Louisa Swain who changed the course of history.
You know, she was just a Quaker woman. She was 70 years old when she cast that first vote.
Mary Mountain, a docent at Wyoming's Woman's History House, says Swain was simply going into town to get her yeast when she cast her ballot.
She was not the fist-pounding suffragette saying we need these rights, but when the rights were afforded, she stepped up.
Not only did the suffragette women fight for the rights of women, but they had a few good men backing them.
It's a harsh thing, it sounds now, to say allowing them, but in those days they were allowing them. These men were saying, let's let women do this.
Mountain says women forget their power until they are heard and believes today's political climate resembles so much of what took place nearly 150 years ago.
We fall into what is customary. You know, men for our 20th century were guiding the political scene. And we are now saying, I don't think that has to continue.
Who knew a quiet state like Wyoming could teach us lessons that transcend time?
Even in that small little environment, possibilities, these big possibilities exist.
For The Race, I'm Annie Taylor.
We're right in front of the White House, and it is something that we often hear, especially after an election. If a candidate does or doesn't win, people threatening to move to Canada. Turns out someone has actually researched that threat.
That's right, and those researchers are calling your bluff. Researchers at the University of Southern California say there are two reasons people do this: focalism and construal level theory. So focalism is when people obsess over one single event while disregarding all the other factors. In this case, you're thinking about the negative consequences of another candidate winning, but you're not actually thinking about everything you'll need to do to uproot your life to Canada. Then there's construal level theory. That just means the further away something is, the more you idealize it. So let's say it's a while before the election day. You might be pretty hyped about the idea of moving to Canada, but once the day finally comes and your candidate loses, you're not very likely to go through with it. After Donald Trump won the presidency, Canada saw 2,000 more Americans than average move to their country that year, but that was only considered as a modest uptick. I'm Annie Taylor for The Race.
The 2018 midterms definitely brought some division to America, but among all the campaign signs, there is one that is bringing people together. Nicole Vowell has the story of a sign of unity at a church here in D.C.
Signs are a staple during any election season.
Yard signs all over the place with people advancing all kinds of different positions.
But as the signs across the nation start to come down post-midterm, Father Jaden Hartsef says,
this is the message that will bring us back together after the election.
This one stays.
Love your neighbor who doesn't look like you, think like you, love like you, speak like you, pray like you, vote like you. Love your neighbor, no exceptions.
Those 28 words are something Hartsef thought of a few months ago after seeing political tension ramp up, even in his own parish.
They were sort of backing away from each other based on political disagreements.
The goal was to change the conversation in his congregation.
What we wanted to do is try to create some sort of statement that brought people together and that rose above politics.
But he got a lot more than that. A single photo of the banner ignited on social media, shared over 77,000 times. Hartsoff is still beaming.
I just can't even believe that. It's amazing.
The next thing he knew, people wanted to share the message offline.
We've had orders for over 700 of them around the country, into Canada, several in the UK.
The public demand for the banner keeps growing, and Hartsoff hopes it's a sign of things to come.
It really isn't about, at the end of the day, how you vote. There's so much more than that to our day-to-day life and to the way that we need to interact with each other in the world.
For The Race, I'm Nicole Vowell reporting.
More to come on The Race from our nation's capital, where it is never too early to start talking about the next election.